Religion can discredit the vegan movement. Religion can discredit whatever it is you are trying to accomplish politically, socially, even artistically. And the temptation is to accept support from religious organizations early on that may seem crucial to your success, but in the longer term actually precludes it. Drug rehabilitation. You want to help people quit drugs, get a job, integrate back into society. Short term, there seems to be every advantage in linking yourself to a religious organization. But when you really think about it, the kind of trust people need to have in you to support your organization, to hand over their brother, sister, son, or grandson to receive therapy at your organization, the kind of scientific legitimacy, political legitimacy you are trying to build up as a drug rehabilitation clinic, right? You can only discredit yourself by being linked to religion, by being a religious organization in any way whatsoever. The presence of and inclusion of Buddhist monks on your board of directors. Oh, you weren't thinking about Buddhism? Oh, you thought I was just talking about Christianity, Judaism, and Islam? Of all the religions, Buddhism maybe has the simplest sort of positive relationship to sobriety, to drug addiction, to therapy, and so on and so forth. But if there is even the slightest taint of a belief in miraculous meditation techniques in your drug rehab facility, okay, you have discredited your institution. You've discredited your movement permanently. Okay? Even if short term, these are the people willing to donate money to support you, so on and so forth. I think that the deeper questions raised about the relationship between religion and veganism now and in the next 5 years, now and in the next 50 years, they are being dodged in our evaluation of Christspiracy as both success and failure. I made this public statement. Religion can discredit the vegan movement, but the vegan movement cannot discredit religion. It takes a moment to think about what the implications of this truly are. Right? What is my point? Look at the attempts of vegans to co-opt Buddhism as a religion. What are the real outcomes? Who in the end gets co-opted? Who gets discredited? Frankly, all right? Buddhism is not now and never has been vegan. And it never will be even compatible with veganism. People have tried so hard to mix the two, but the resulting mixture, as I say, is only disadvantageous to vegans. Whether or not the Buddhists get anything out of it is another story. And of all the religions in the world, obviously the one that has the most natural kind of aesthetic compatibility with the vegan message, the vegan cause, would be Buddhism. Take a look right now. You can Google it. These organizations in Israel that have been around for decades, trying to link the vegan message to Judaism, like biblical Orthodox Judaism, trying to link the message of veganism to Christianity, to Islam, to the great monotheos in the sky. If you actually read the ancient literature of Buddhism, you get a very good sense of what people were concerned about at that time. So to give an example, there was no concern whatsoever about ecology. ecology in our sense. So many people have tried to co-opt Buddhism this way. Tried to make Buddhism into an ecological movement, tried to create Buddhist ecological movements, and it'll never work. At best, any argument for kind of Buddhist ecology relies on arguments built out of silence, where you're saying, oh, look, the text here says nothing at all, but we can read between the lines. We can assign to it some kind of concern about ecology. What were people concerned with in the ancient world? It wasn't the scarcity of forests, and it wasn't the scarcity of elephants or monkeys or wild animals of any kind either. The lack, shall we say, the paucity, the absence of any concern about animal suffering, the harm caused by the production of meat in the diet. All right? This is evident even in the Buddhist canon, even in the ancient Buddhist literature. How much more evident is it? How much more insurmountable is it when we're talking about Christian or Muslim literature? And how ridiculous do you make yourself appear to be in trying to interpret the silences in the text as if Moses gave a damn about the suffering of the animals sacrificed to feed his bloodthirsty God? There's no evidence Moses cared about the suffering of human beings who were slaughtered. There's very strong evidence to the contrary, that Moses had quite a bloodthirsty attitude towards slaying, in his own words, your brother, friend, and neighbor, massacring his fellow Jews, let alone foreigners. It's nothing but massacres, that Old Testament, bro. So just say, if you have a sincere interest in kind of the anthropology of the ancient world, you get a very good sense of what people cared about and what religious leaders were reproaching them for being excessively concerned with. Human beings then as now, obsessed with beauty, obsessed with status symbols, whether that be jewelry, having a fancy carriage. I mean, how many passages of the Buddhist canon are about the vanity of going around in a fancy carriage and showing that was obviously a major, major cultural concern at that time? Or the simple luxury that now we all take for granted of simply wearing cloth, simply having a length of, what for us would be factory-made cloth. Then everything's made on a hand loom. Being able to wrap yourself in a fine piece of fabric when you're out in public. The luxuries that people cared about and they obsessed over. There were at least a few mentions in that ancient Buddhist literature of obesity, the problem of not getting fat. So you might think everyone was skinny in the ancient world. We have evidence to the contrary. Prostitution. Oh, I'm sorry. Have you ever checked how many times is prostitution mentioned in the Old Testament? How much interest is there in prostitution? How much interest is there in sex slavery or having sex with one's slaves? So on and so forth. Whether we're talking about ancient India, ancient China, ancient Israel, Palestine, ancient Near East, however you want to describe it. These are major concerns that a lot of ink is devoted to. A lot of inches of text are devoted to. And now you want to turn to the central ethical concerns of veganism, of the vegan movement in the 21st century, whether you think of those ecologically or not. The most basic concept of being responsible for the consequences of your actions in terms of the needless harm and suffering inflicted on an animal on the one hand, and what we could call both literally and figuratively the downstream effects of slaughtering animals. As little as air pollution might have mattered to people in the ancient world when they, were lighting things on fire and so on, the horror of seeing an animal slaughtered on the side of the river and seeing the blood and the pus and the bones and the shit being washed down the rocks into the river, and it's just I've witnessed this myself, living in third world countries in the 21st century. But there's no difference in how horrifying those spectacles were. than it is now. And it was not any harder to draw conclusions that the world would be a better place if none of us were slaughtering animals this way and washing away these rivers of blood, so to speak, as opposed to millions of people doing it multiple times per day, so on and so forth. So you just say, the lack of interest, the lack of any sincere concern over thousands of years that we have textual evidence for, from at least dozens of different cultures that left us, substantial corpuses of written text. That's what we have to learn from religion. The fundamental lesson we have to learn is that all of the world's religions are against us. And reciprocally, we are against them. And why? It's very easy to look around the world now and say, well, we vegans, ethical vegans, ecological vegans, what have you, we're far fewer than 1% of the people of the world. But then if you don't just think about the number of people who are alive today, but you think back over a few centuries or a few millennia, what a tiny, tiny percentage we are of all the people who have ever lived and of all the people who have ever written down what it was they cared about. Again, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, China, India. Again, I also have background studying the history of the Cree and Ojibwe First Nations people, indigenous people. All these civilizations that have arisen and in some cases fallen, and look to your left, look to your right. Nobody cares. It's certainly a delusion that's easy for us to imagine, to sympathize with, to relate to, that we can pull ourselves out of obscurity by linking our little cart to the much larger train of religion, and that great and powerful train is going to pull us out of this swamp, pull us out of the mire. It's so big, it has so many millions of people. If only we can link our tiny doomed cause to this great, powerful, wealthy movement, religion like Christianity, or religion like Buddhism, It's easy to think about the ways in which that's going to give credibility, social influence, and power to veganist movement. But I'm here to tell you the exact opposite is true. Any link between veganism and religion, it can only discredit the vegan movement. And conversely, try as we might, we can never discredit religion in the eyes of the religious. They will go on believing, no matter how many thousands of animals they see literally suffering on an altar, being sacrificed to imaginary gods.